thank you for joining us on this Friday evening. We're having a few technical problems at Space Oddities HQ, so please bear with us. I hope you can see us on YouTube. We know there's been a bit of an intermittent feed to YouTube, so we're just hoping that that you can see us. So I'm joined this evening by Daz. How are you, Daz?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Jolly good.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this for a long time.
We have indeed. We have indeed.
So
We're going to go over very shortly to NASA TV for the live coverage of the undocking, which should be happening before too long. Do we have NASA TV, Dad?
we do. I can't promise we're actually showing to anyone, mate.
Right. Well, I don't see it listed there.
No.
Ah, now we are. Okay. Right.
Oh, that's that. Yeah, I'll just
Right. Can we now maximise that?
yeah. Let me just bear with me. I think we're talking to ourselves, mate.
Just let me try this.
I can't find it anywhere.
Yep, I think we're live. Yes, we are live. So.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Yeah. We do apologise, viewers. It's been one of those evenings. However, tonight is the penultimate step in the return to Earth of the Boeing Starliner, this disastrous mission, which has been a disaster since it launched in June. It's ended up marooning 2 astronauts on the International Space Station for 8 months when they should have only stayed for 8 days. The spacecraft is returning empty to the Earth because NASA made the decision at the end of August that it was too dangerous to allow the Boeing Starliner to take the astronauts home, given its propulsion problems and other helium leaks and other odds and ends. And we hope that the mission, the undocking goes smoothly and that the spacecraft lands safely. Now, we will be covering the landing of the Boeing Starliner, which is due to happen at 5:45 UK time tomorrow morning. We hope you can join us for that. We'll be up early for that, certainly. And let's hope that it all goes well. Any thoughts about this, Daz?
Well, as I said, we've been waiting for this for so long. It's been the only way I can describe it is been a pig's ear right from the word go. Some of the decisions that have been made I think there's going to have to be questions answered when this all gets back. So I just hope that they do get this thing back in one piece. I hope more than anything, I hope it gets away from the space station safely.
Yes.
And then, because of course, it's got to do some certain maneuvers around the space station. Although they've changed that, because usually I think they said they go underneath, but I think they're going to go over the top of it, and then they're going to push themselves away gently. And it needs to totally clear the space station, and then about 6 hours time, it will come down and hopefully land safely in the desert. Because it lands on land. That doesn't sound right, but it does. It lands on land. It's not going to splash down.
No.
It's totally uncrewed.
Yep.
Because NASA just erred on the side of caution. So yeah, we've just got to watch this, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that everything's going fine. As you can see on the pictures, it's sat there. They've got it looks quite pretty, but they're sat there at the moment.
Yeah.
But basically, it's a white elephant. It's
That's right.
It's just sat there. They've got to get rid of this so they can then resume normal working conditions on the International Space Station for crew rotations and everything. This is just holding up a docking port because they've only got 2 where the Starliner and the Dragon can actually hook up to. So they've got to get rid of this so they can get the next crew up. And then the crew that's on there now will be able to come back. But of course, that's all messed up because we'll probably talk about that in a little while.
Yes, right. Can we just put the volume on from NASA, see whether there's any indication of when this is actually happening? because it should be happening around now.
National Space Station and the teams here in the Starliner Mission Control confirming that we are continuing to be go for an undock in just under 2 minutes from now at 5:04 p.m. Central, 6:04 p.m. Eastern. We are standing by for the command of the Undock ATP or authority to proceed.
Okay, so about 2 minutes to go.
Yeah, so
once the authority to proceed is issued for undocking, the NDS or NASA docking system hooks will begin to open, and there are 12 hooks that seal the surfaces between the NDS and the ISS International Docking Adapter, or IDA. Once all 12 hooks are open, springs on Starliner's docking ring will push the spacecraft away from the space station.
Okay. Now, just a
Flight
reminder,
Director Chloe Marion just asked for quiet in the room as we are approaching 1 minute out from Starliner undocking.
just a reminder, this undocking software.
And we just heard confirmation that the umbilicals are retracting and hooks are beginning to drive.
This undocking software is untested.
in
They've
this
run
configuration,
simulations on it, but it's completely untested. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah, you say it's untested, but it has been used before. But because they were this crew were supposed to be on, they've had to totally reconfigure it.
Yeah,
so it's never been tested used in this configuration because they've had to mess around with it. So
that's right.
Ian's asking what could possibly go wrong in this moment.
30
Hopefully they've got the hooks retracting, and then hopefully it will just gently push itself away. So that's the first thing, is to get it undocked, and then it's got to do its maneuvers and then fire its thrusters to get into the right attitude and telemetry for its coming. There it goes.
It's undocked.
Separation confirmed. Starliner is now backing away from station and starting its return to Earth. Starliner thrusters will then complete 2 short firings to gradually increase the separation speed to help the spacecraft carefully move away from the orbiting lab.
The vehicle is now about 2 meters away from the International Space Station. At the time of undocking, Starliner and the International Space Station were flying approximately 260 statute miles over central China.
Well, so far, so good. But of course, that was a purely mechanical process. The springs pushed the Starliner away.
A breakout burn soon, which will take the spacecraft forward and above station. During this burn sequence, Starliner's thrusters will perform a series of 12 short firings. The entire sequence takes about 5 minutes to complete and allows Starliner to quickly break out to outside the approach ellipsoid, or AE. And about 4 minutes into the burn sequence, Starliner will exit the Kout Sphere, or the KOS.
Was it supposed to turn? I presume it was.
Yeah, you can see that it's firing its thrusters. If you look on the left, you see the thrusters firing. So it's under thruster control at the moment.
And you can see those thrusters firing there on the left of your screen as Starliner backs away from space station.
And we are now just at 35 meters away from the International Space Station.
Lovely view.
We saw a good first burn.
Houston, ISS thrusters enabled.
Confirmation, all 27 jets have fired.
Good.
Houston copies, ISS thrusters enabled.
And you're seeing the light show there on your screen.
And the first 3 of the 12 firings have completed, and there's about a 100-second pause until the 4th burn.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
well, that's the first task to be ticked off, that it's actually now undocked. Which was, like I said, that was one of the things they couldn't do without the crew on board.
That's right.
Because when they configured this was configured, the actual software was configured to fire with a crew on board.
Yes.
and it needed somebody actually on board to press the undock button, sort of thing.
Indeed.
That's being a bit simplistic.
No.
But
Flight controllers are reporting good attitude and good
but of
control.
course, when they decided they're not returning the crew, they then found
We are
out that
standing
the
by for the
configuration
fourth of the 12
of the automated
burns in the
system,
series of firings as
although
part of the breakout
loaded,
burn. As a
was
reminder, the entire
deconfigured
sequence will take
to
about
be
5 minutes to
used
complete.
by a crew, not by
About 4
automation.
minutes into the
Yeah.
sequence,
So they've
Starliner
had
will
to
cross what is
reconfigure
known
this.
as
There
the
was something like
the
about a
Kout
million
Sphere.
lines of code that they've had to
The
go
Kout
through
Sphere is an
to
imaginary
achieve
200-meter
this.
sphere centered on the space
But
station.
everything seems smooth at the moment. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
We are 15 seconds away from the fourth burn in the series of 12.
There we go.
And you just saw burn 4, which just completed. We're hearing good burn.
And
Of
the
course,
fifth burn in that sequence of 12 just completed, and it was a good burn.
we don't know whether those burns are actually putting it on the right trajectory, but they're certainly doing something.
I think because they're firing all of them,
Mm.
I think it's basically test firings to make sure that everything's all the jets, all the thrusters are
The
working.
sixth burn in the series of 12 was just completed, and it was a good burn. We are halfway through the series of 12, 6 more to go.
Right, Samuel
You might be able to see some
Lorenzo
of those lights on the front
is asking
of
about this
Starliner.
module. Is it
A
going to be
red and
used
a
for the
green
moon
and a
or
white.
Mars?
Those
It's
indicate the
neither.
different sides
This
of
is basically a
Starliner,
taxi service
and they're used
to
by the ISS crew to
low,
watch Starliner move away from the
low space orbit,
ISS along the
or
undocking axis.
initially for the International Space
And
Station.
we just heard
It's going to
good
be the same
confirmation
as the
of
Dragon,
both burn 7
but
and
this
8
is not
completed.
designed for taking
Starliner
anyone any long
undocked
distances.
approximately 5
That's
minutes
where
ago,
the
and has
Orion
just a
capsule
handful of
comes
short
in with the
firings left in its
SLS.
breakout burn.
So they
And
go,
it
of
is
course,
now
up to
about
the moon.
150 meters away from the International
Yeah,
Space
good question
Station.
there, Sam. Thank you.
And we heard confirmation of a good burn 9, 3 more to go.
But then again, saying that, if the Orion misses the moon, it can carry on to Mars.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Don't. No, Samuel. This is part of
Burn 10, good burn.
NASA's Commercial Crew Program. In 2015, they asked both SpaceX and Boeing to design a vehicle for taking astronauts and cargo to and from the International Space Station. SpaceX built the Dragon, which has so far flown, I think, 9 or 10 crews to the International Space Station, plus lots of cargo missions without incident, without any problems.
We have one
Boeing
more
built this
burn to go,
Parlica,
but they have confirmed
and
that Starliner has crossed the Kout Sphere, or the
been nothing
KOS,
short of
which
disastrous.
is an imaginary 200-meter sphere centered on the International Space Station that helps flight controllers here on the ground monitor the arrival and departure of visiting vehicles.
Station Houston, space to ground 2. Starliner has exited the Kout Sphere.
Right, so it's exited the imaginary sphere around the space station that
She's exited the Kout
spacecraft
Sphere.
are not allowed to enter until everything is 100% guaranteed safe. And it's now left that imaginary sphere, which, if I remember right, is 500 meters around the International Space Station. So now, technically, it doesn't pose any danger to the International Space Station, although it
A
could.
reminder, this automated breakout sequence was chosen to use Starliner's forward thrusters, which had remained nominal during this flight.
So thrusters are all okay.
And we heard confirmation that all 12 burns in this series of breakout burn firings have completed, and they were all good burns. Starliner has crossed the Kout Sphere. So the next milestone for Starliner's departure will be crossing the approach ellipsoid, or AE. The AE is another invisible shape monitored by the flight control team, measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. Starliner is scheduled to cross the approach ellipsoid in about 10 minutes. Vehicles outside the AE have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory, which means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, even if it lost all maneuvering capabilities.
Of
Once
course,
outside the approach ellipsoid, joint operations between Starliner Mission Control and the International Space Station Flight Control Room will conclude, and Starliner will be on a path back to Earth.
Okay, Daz, I think we can cut the sound from that for a while. Nothing's going to
Okay,
happen
then,
for 10 minutes. So the big question is, of course, is what happens next? Well, what happens next, which you will find out tomorrow morning, is the Starliner entering the atmosphere on its deploying its parachutes and landing on land, because unlike, for example, the Apollo capsule, Starliner is equipped with airbags that allow it to land on land. So this actually is quite a step forward for re-entering vehicles. What happens after that, of course, well, depends a lot on the success of this undocking, which seems to be going well so far, and the landing. But the future of the Starliner is very, very much up in the air at the moment. NASA's official line is that the Starliner will be flying crews to the International Space Station, but they've had such problems with this mission that big questions have been asked about the viability of the whole project. So while we're waiting for Starliner to do that, across the next imaginary barrier, if you like, what I thought we might do is to have a look at the history of this troubled mission. Daz, if you could keep an eye on NASA TV and make sure that we're not missing anything. So let me just put this up for you. Give me 1 second. So the Boeing Starliner. Boeing Starliner. You can tell it's laser.
Do you want me to take this down, Andy? Because I've still got it on screen.
Yeah, please.
Right.
The Boeing Starliner has had a real checkered history. Let me just take you through this so we can see exactly what's happened. So this actually started back in November 2015 when NASA awarded contracts to both Boeing and Starliner to develop a vehicle to deliver crew and cargo to the ISS. Boeing received $4.2 billion for this, and SpaceX only received $2.3 billion. The first uncrewed orbital test flight, known as OFT-1, was in December 2019, and the mission failed to reach the ISS due to a timer anomaly, and it returned to Earth prematurely, not having completed its mission. Later, 68 problems were identified with the spacecraft, mainly in software. Unbelievably, the software, which is made up of different modules, had not been tested together on the ground. NASA had allowed Boeing to forego those tests, testing all the different modules software together at the same time. Also, normally what happens with a spacecraft is that when it takes off, its clock is zeroed to signify the start of the mission. Well, for some reason, the Boeing Starliner decided to zero its clock 12 hours before that. So when it launched, it thought it was 12 hours further into the mission than it actually was, which meant it didn't perform the right course maneuvers. And consequently, there's no way it could get into the correct orbit to dock with the ISS. That was a disaster. And that didn't stop Boeing from carrying on, of course. They attempted another orbital flight because they had to carry out two successfully for the spacecraft to be certified to be able to carry humans. This was scrubbed because just a few hours before launch, they discovered that fuel valves on the spacecraft were stuck in the open position, 12 of them. And what it later turned out was that the valves had become corroded by the interaction of water with spacecraft fuel, and this is why they were stuck. Boeing never found out exactly what had caused that problem, so they just decided to replace all the valves and hope that it worked. But the problem was never actually resolved. That wasn't the last problem, though. In May 2022, they did have another crack at it. The OFT-2 mission did successfully launch and dock with the International Space Station. However, there were problems with the thrusters and guidance systems. Those problems with the thrusters would crop up again, but the mission was deemed a success because it did dock with the ISS and return safely to the Earth. In May 2023, the next mission was delayed because they had found problems with parachutes, and also that literally miles of electrical cabling inside the Starliner had been wrapped in a tape that was flammable. So they obviously, NASA couldn't allow that to fly because of obvious safety issues. In the end, they didn't replace all of the tape. They just replaced the bits they thought were perhaps more susceptible to catching light. But again, a big embarrassment, a problem. In March 2024, NASA decided that Boeing had done so well with the spacecraft that they extended the contract and gave it another 6 flights on the contract for crew transport to the ISS. And NASA said they were quite confident in the Starliner program, although obviously, as we've seen up until then, it had been a complete disaster. So that was in March 2024. And then it says May here, but it was June because it was delayed. June of this year, as we know, the current mission was launched, and it was at the end of, towards the end of July, that they identified that there were some fairly serious problems again with the thrusters overheating, stopping them working at optimal performance, stopping them develop their proper thrust. And in late August, NASA made the decision they didn't trust the Starliner to return the astronauts to the Earth safely. Butch Wilmore and Suni Wilson, and they are now going to come back on a SpaceX spacecraft, the SpaceX Dragon, in February 2025. So their initial 8-day stay has turned into an 8-month stay. So that's the story. Any comments, Daz?
Well, let's just start. Because also when they did do the unmanned test and it did dock with the International Space Station, you got to remember, as well as the thrusters underperforming, they had trouble with the docking ring.
Yeah.
Because as you know, the docking ring extends from the Starliner, but then they had to move back out again, retract the docking ring and extend it again.
Yeah.
And then luckily this time it actually all worked, so they were able to do it.
Yeah.
So now you can see how far away it is from the International Space Station. So it's successfully undocked. That's the first thing they needed to achieve, was to actually get it away from the International Space Station. And of course, there was worries that with the thruster problems that it could spin out of control or hits the International Space Station. I don't know whether they've actually taken any precautions on the International Space Station. I mean, the only thing they could be doing is if they thought that there was a possible problem that, or there could have been initially a problem, is that they would have to all get into the Dragon.
Yes.
Which is what they normally do, which is a go-to. If there's anything, a problem, if they think there's space debris or anything like that, they always go to their designated capsules, and then they sit it out so that they can undock as soon as, if anything untoward does happen. So I haven't actually heard whether or not the crew were told to go to the Dragon and wait it out, or what, because of course they weren't needed for this, because it's all automated. So but yeah, it's I mean, of course, the one of the main problems that Boeing's got now, when this does come back, we're only getting the capsule back, we're not getting the service module back. And this is where 90% of the problems are.
Yes, that's right. So don't forget, viewers, that the service module on the back of the capsule detaches before re-entry, and of course those thrusters that have been spectacularly failing are in the service module, so they're not going to come back to the Earth for testing. Boeing have sort of identified what the problems are with the thrusters, that they are overheating when people actually take control of it and fire the thrusters manually. And that's fine. But of course, it's a design problem. And it's unbelievably something that they either didn't test or didn't test sufficiently, because they knew from the previous mission that there were problems with the thrusters, and yet they were allowed to fly again with the same problems. So, you can make of that what you will. I think it speaks to a culture of the same culture that has recently been slammed, if you like, in the report from the Office of the Inspector General about the SLS, the Space Launch System, where they identified a culture of Boeing using undertrained, underqualified, and inefficient staff and management practices. And I think it's the same thing, that obviously the testing regime for the Starliner was nowhere near as good as it could have been, because if you've got a problem with a dodgy thruster, you don't just say, oh, well, perhaps it won't happen again. You get to the root of the problem, and they singularly failed to do that after the last mission. Hence the reason that they've actually ended up marooning 2 astronauts away from their families for 8 months instead of 8 days.
Yeah, because the main problem is with these. Oh, they've moved it off now. If you can see on the service module, these rectangular blocks on the side. Now there's 4 of them, and they called them dog houses.
Yeah.
And in there's a multitude of thrusters. And what they've found is that when they're using the thrusters or manually, for some unknown reason, the heat is being retained in the doghouse, and the thrusters are losing capability. They're losing power. They're not working to their optimum pressures and that. So, and this is what the problem was. Now, they've had a capsule that's been sat around for a couple of years now that did do one tour, and they've actually tried to strip this down. But what they're saying is that these dog houses, once they're assembled, they can't test them on Earth.
No.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's a load of BS. At the end of the day, you're going to put people on this. You've got to test these things to the nth degree.
Yeah.
And there was one where they did one of their press conferences. It was sort of slipped through, and nobody sort of like picked up on it. But I did, is that they were talking about that they were talking to other companies that have used these types of thrusters, and they've had similar problems.
Yeah.
Now, isn't that a red flag?
Yes, definitely. It's a red flag.
It's a red flag. There's just one thing. Just a quick question, Andy, if you want to take it. It's
Certainly.
from Sandra Grace.
Oh, hi, Sandra. Good evening. Hope you're well.
It says, I'm not sure what it says. Is it because they have to wait for the Dragon to be ready that they have to stay up there till next February? So she's talking about Sunny and Butch and Sundance. So do you want to take that, Andy?
Yeah, well, what's going to happen? The next crewed mission before then was going to launch with 4 astronauts. 2 have been bumped off to provide an extra 2 seats for Butch and Sunny. Now, the SpaceX Dragon can actually carry 7 astronauts. It has the capacity for 7 astronauts, but it's only flight qualified for 4 at the moment. It's never been certified to carry 7. So they have to work with 4 seats. So it will launch. When's that? Is this month, isn't it? The next.
Well, now they've got it. Now they've got it cleared.
Yeah.
They can launch it. I don't know when it's scheduled. I'd have to go and.
I think it's this month. I think it's this month.
I think it will be this month because they want to get some of the crew back. And of course they'll be coming back on the Dragon that they've got at the moment.
Yeah.
But the problem was suits.
Yes, absolutely.
And this is one thing that both me and Andy have discussed in the past, is why are not both the suits for the Starliner and the Dragon compatible? So apparently there is one Dragon suit up there that went up with the lady astronaut from the USA. Something what was her name? Something Dyson. Bison.
Yes, that's right. I think so.
She went up on the Soyuz, but
Mm,
they also sent up a Dragon suit in case she had to come back via Dragon because of the Soyuz. They've had their own problems, and so they had one suit, but that would also mean that one of them had to come back in um, a Starliner suit, and of course, it's not
mm.
compatible with the fixings and things like that, so it wouldn't be pressurized or
No, that's.
whatever whatever systems they've got on there. So,
Mm,
um, but yeah, so that's one of the problems. So when they go up,
yeah.
they're supposed to be taking at least one suit, if not two, and then two of the crew that are up there now, which is they will be coming back with the two crew that go up this time.
Yes.
It's very confusing, very confusing.
Mm,
Butch and Sonny will stay up there until, as Andy said, February. Then they will come back with, I think it's crew 9 or 10.
yeah, it's crew 9, I think, isn't it?
Crew
Yeah.
9.
Yes.
So
Can I just get through some of these other questions? Sorry,
yeah,
Daz.
carry on, mate. Yeah,
Um,
carry on.
yeah, Samuel says, as a hobbyist software developer, I say that things can happen. I totally agree with you, Samuel. I'm a software developer myself. Whenever any of my systems have gone live in the past, they've never done so without me testing and testing and testing and testing and testing and not letting anything go live until I was happy that everything was working. You do get problems occasionally, of course, but the point is that you do as much testing as you possibly can. Now, putting it in software terms, what about if you built a software application and you rolled it out and it had problems? And then a little while later, you had to roll a similar software application out that used some of the same routines that were faulty. You wouldn't do it. You would make sure you fix those problems before rolling the same thing out again to cause more problems. But this is exactly what Boeing have done with the Starliner. So, there's no excuse for them not fixing the thruster problem when they knew they had the problem. Yet they let people launch on this thing, and they knew they had the problem, or potentially had the problem. So there we go. Let's.
I've had to cancel the
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because they
Absolutely.
finished. They finished. We were for some
Yeah.
reason. That's NASA space.
Robin Edgar says, "Hi, Robin. Hope you're well. If it's Boeing and you're going, you may not be coming back on Boeing." So,
Yeah.
yeah. So
We'll have to start a poets corner.
yeah.
Yeah.
Robin, hope you can come back and give us another talk on Space Oddities, please, soon. Hope you're doing well. We can't wait to see you again. Anyway, what else have we got here? Samuel says again, and he's absolutely right. Very disappointed to see incompetence creeping in on every facet of technology. Yeah. Absolutely true.
And the thing is, that is a very true word. And Andy knows that I'm mad. I'm almost. I keep saying to him that I'm not sleeping at nights because I'm getting this cynical head. And every time, I mean, I'm going to end up a conspiracy theorist. I can see it. But every time the Inspector General, Office of the Inspector General overseeing NASA, does any report, then I'm there and I'm downloading it and I'm reading it. And the thing is, as you say with the incompetence thing, is if you read anything, I don't want to knock them down, but Boeing have only got themselves to blame. They're being hammered for things like untrained staff or train not up to the standard that NASA are expecting. Faulty welding, and I'm talking about the Mobile Launcher 2, which is needed very soon for the next version of the SLS because it's bigger. They're building it. There's a company who's never done anything like this before. And they're getting away with murder. They're using a cost plus contract, and they're getting away with murder.
Yeah.
The SLS is being really hammered again because they're finding some of the welding on some of the major components, like the top of the oxygen tank for I think it was section 2, the welding is faulty. It's not up to grade.
No,
And
that's
if you
right.
got something like that fail, but also, I mean, we've got the Starliner, and they all say exactly the same things.
Yep.
Is that I mean, this is a slightly different case, because this is a case where Boeing did a fixed price contract, and they've sworn they will never do one again. Because the last I heard, I think they were 1.6 billion in the red, was it? Was that right, or am I talking about the SLS there? I don't know.
No, no,
But
no.
they
The Starliner has so far cost them 1.6 billion
yeah,
on top of the value of the contract.
yeah,
They
yeah.
have paid an extra 1.6 billion to solve these problems. Can I just go to Ian? Ian
Yeah,
asks,
carry on, mate.
is it simply because they are a commercial outfit that they have so many problems? I don't know.
Boeing.
Yeah.
I mean, Boeing are what we call, you've often heard us refer to, old space. They've been there since the year dot, and they were the people, along with the likes of Northrop Grumman. What were the other ones, Andy? You know, the whole
Oh,
crew.
Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, Lockheed Martin, Rocketdyne, and all that. And these were the people who built the Apollos. And the reason that they had to go, and this goes, as I said, all this troubles go back to the very beginning of NASA. In fact, beyond there, with this cost plus contracts, because they go back to the war, when they were preparing munitions for the army during the Second World War. It might even be the First World War as well. But they, this is where these contracts come from. They're still using them, and basically it means that they, although when they initially set it out, they have targets. You want to be here at this time. You want to be there at the same time. You want to get this done. You want to get that done, and they miss these goals every single time. So it extends the time, it increases the cost, and yet the government will pick up the tab. And also, when they got targets, and when they reach that target, they could be a year behind.
Yeah.
They will still, because they've reached that target, get that bonus. And you're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds. So they're given money for failing. And this is what it is. So to try and cut costs, because costs in NASA are being really squeezed at the moment, they did try this fixed price. And it's to encourage competition and get things cheaper.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
this is the first time Boeing's done it. They failed miserably. As Andy said earlier on, SpaceX got half the amount of money that Boeing did, yet they achieved it.
Yeah,
For
and they
half
not
the
only
price.
achieved it, they've run many crewed missions
Yeah, exactly.
and cargo missions without one single problem.
Yeah.
Can I just catch up something that Samuel
Yeah,
said?
carry on.
Samuel, you were asking about the fact that the Starliner looks like the old Apollo capsule. Well, it does. The reason is that when NASA decided they were going to go back to the moon, they decided to use a design that they knew worked. So it's no surprise that both the Orion capsule and actually the Boeing Starliner have come up with this. They've come up with the same design, a similar design to Apollo, because they know it worked. They didn't break any new ground, apart from obviously the technology being up to date. In terms of design, they wanted to come up with a system that worked, because they knew that Apollo had worked spectacularly. The Saturn V and the Apollo Command and Service modules and the Lunar module all work fantastically every time. So this is why these vehicles have ended up looking like Apollo spacecraft, because that design works. Now, you could argue, well, we're in the 21st century now. Couldn't somebody come up with a better design? But it was all based on what works, we'll do it again. So that's the reason, really.
And also, I think they bought every type of switch, rocker switch, toggles, fuses, and everything like that, trippers, in the world, and they've still got a bulk of them because they still use them. Now,
Yeah.
I saw a mock-up of the Starliner 2 or 3 years ago, and it looked a lot like the inside of a Dragon, Where, of course, in the Dragon, there's very few switches at all. It's all done by touchscreen. So they can play Candy Crush while they're taking off and things like that. It's really fantastic.
They do, actually.
Yeah, but it's while they're waiting. While they're waiting.
It's to calm their nerves, you know.
Yeah. Clash of Clans. Anyway, but I saw a mock-up of the Starliner, and it looked very, very similar, where it was all touchscreens. But if you look at this Starliner, like you say, it's like an old Apollo. It's all switches. It's all there is some touchscreens in there.
It reminds me more of the space shuttle, actually.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, Christ, the space shuttle.
Yeah, that level of complexity, like the flight deck of a 747. You know, it's just.
It was, and it's like Andy said, it's a technology they know, and they want to stick with it. It beggars, instead of going down the technologies way, they've stuck with what they know. And to be quite honest, the Starliner, when you see inside it, it's cramped. It's just loads of switches. In the Dragon, the crew seem to be able to get in and get out quite easily, but in the Starliner, when they put the two astronauts in this time, it took them ages to get them in because they got to clamber over this, that, and the other. They've got all the switches and things like that. So, and of course, then they've got also these logbooks, these checklists, and they're sort of like just velcroed onto the thing, and they just go through them.
Yeah.
And it's, whereas on the Dragon, it's all touchscreens. It's all this and that, and so it's so tidy. But like I said, we've got to. So the idea of the commercial crew was to increase competition and lower the price. That was the goal. But unfortunately, Boeing have failed miserably, whereas SpaceX, they won hands down. And in fact, basically, NASA and the US country, the American country, should thank SpaceX for actually giving them access to space, because they would be they'll be beholden to the Russians again like they were before. And this was another reason why they had to build their own once they cancelled the space shuttle. Yeah, it is. When you look into it, you can see what the problem is. And as I said, every time they get reports, Boeing and really anything to do with old space is always the same old thing. You virtually read in the same report every single time. And a lot of it's to do with untrained staff, poor quality control, poor safety measures, and things like that. So,
well, of course, I mean, I'm not an expert on the aviation industry by any means, but you talk to most people in the know, and they say Boeing's problems went back to when they merged with McDonnell Douglas back in the late 90s. That's when things went downhill, and that's when Boeing started to be run by accountants rather than engineers. That's what everybody says. I have no idea whether it's true, but but their quality control in particular has definitely deteriorated since then.
Because Boeing used to be the benchmark for perfect engineering.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then they as soon as they merged with Lockheed Martin, it became a cash cow. They were going to milk it for everything they can get.
Yeah.
Which basically standards have dropped ever since then. And it's not just to do with space, it's also to do with their aviation business. We all know the troubles that they've had. They're under investigation still for lots of things. And the thing is that they're asked to correct things, and 2 years later, they still haven't done it. This was one of the things I noticed in the last report.
Can I just take Ian's question?
Yeah, carry on, mate.
Why in space did they allow Boeing to continue? Right. So, Ian, Boeing has an army of lobbyists in Washington. Boeing work in most, if not all, states in the USA. The respective congressmen wants Boeing to continue working in their states because it provides jobs, and of course, if there are no jobs, then they get voted out of Congress by the voters. Boeing have got a lot of financial clout, Now, I'm not suggesting at the moment that anybody in Congress is on the take, but they are a very powerful group of lobbyists, Boeing, and NASA can only do what Congress tell them to do. NASA cannot make big decisions about contractors without the approval of Congress. So so it continues. So this is the situation that it is.
Yeah.
Whereas, you see, SpaceX haven't got that political clout, and NASA have always, put it like this, not openly, but there are people within NASA who've always been dead against NASA using commercial companies like SpaceX. The current administrator, Bill Nelson, although he's changed his tune a bit now, seeing which way the wind is blowing, but certainly a few years ago, he was absolutely against the idea of NASA using SpaceX. And, this comes ultimately from Washington. He's the administrator. He has to dance to Washington's tune, unfortunately. So there you are. So I think we'll call it a day for today, ladies and gentlemen. Would like to thank you very, very much for being with us this evening. Thank you for sparing the time and spending it with us. We will return at 5:45 UK for the final bit of this sorry saga, the landing of the Boeing Starliner. Now, parachutes. They've had problems with these parachutes in the past. It just goes on and on. So anyway, we hope to see you at, I know it's very, very early. You're not likely to be up. We will be here. Of course, I'm lucky because it's 6:45 where I am. So I get an extra hour's sleep.
It doesn't work like that, Andy. You're an hour ahead now as well.
I'm joking. So, yeah, of course, I don't get an extra hour's sleep. But it's a later time for me to get up. Yeah. So it won't be quite the middle of the night. So I will be here at 6:45. Daz will be here at 5:45 UK. So we hope to see you in the morning. And if not, you can watch the recording afterwards, of course. So, Aaron, thanks for being here, Aaron. We'll see you on Tuesday, of course. And we'd like to thank all of you, especially for your questions. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Samuel, for being here. We hope to see you on Tuesday, if not tomorrow.
Can I just, before we go, Andy, can I just, you'll probably find there was another thing that we hope to be covering, and that's Polaris Dawn. And you've probably noticed, if you've been following on Facebook, that it's changed the date several times. So please bear with us. We're frustrated as well, but I can't imagine what the astronauts feel like, the Polaris Dawn astronauts feel like. But at the moment, it stands that it's Monday morning.
Monday morning
at 8:38.
8:38 UK.
That's BST. Yeah. So work out your timings and stuff like that. But remember, it's subject to change. But keep an eye on Facebook and all that. I'm trying to keep on top of it. But every time I post something, 5 minutes later, they've moved it again.
They keep changing it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll as soon as we know something certain, we'll be on it.
So just let me thanks, Daz. Just let me go over again. We'll be here at 5:45 UK time this morning, or tomorrow morning, or whatever you are at the moment. 5:45 BST for the landing of the Starliner. Monday morning, we'll be going live at 8:15 BST for the launch of the Polaris Dawn, this unique, innovative, exciting SpaceX mission. And then, of course, we'll be back on Tuesday with our normal Tuesday live stream, and all the gang will be here. Sorry, we've only been two of us tonight. Michael's out, and when Michael goes out, he doesn't just go out; he goes out. So Michael's out tonight, so he couldn't join us. He's hoping to join us in the morning, depending on how much sleep he gets. But Tuesday, we're going to start a new series on the live stream. And Lou is going to be telling us, or investigating, climate change, but from the point of view of space. So that looks quite interesting. And we look forward to the first one of those on Tuesday as well. So if we don't see you tomorrow, and we don't see you on Monday, 8 o'clock UK on Tuesday for our normal Tuesday live stream, with Lou talking about climate change from the point of view of space, all our regular features, of course, when all the gang will be here, hopefully. So from Daz and myself, we bid you a very good night. Thanks for being here again, and we'll hopefully see you in the morning. A bit later this
Bye
morning.
bye. Oh, be
Bye-bye.
sleepy eyed. Oh, be sleepy.